This is Sakina Bhatt and welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly news on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's look at the headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama speaks at International Religious Freedom Summit. His Holiness the Dalai Lama gives teaching on Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. 4 Tibetan monks given extraordinarily harsh sentences following China's crackdown on Tengdro Monastery. US Senate confirms Uzra Zeya for the State Department's Under-Secretary of State Bureau of Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights. Representative Ngodup Tsering attends Stop the 2022 Beijing Genocide Games rally in Washington, D.C. Representative Tashi Phuntsok visits Yuenten Ling, meets journalist Giselle Nath. Tibetan spiritual leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, sent a message to the 2021 International Religious Freedom Summit, a joint initiative of Ambassador Brownback, former head of Office of International Religious Freedom, and Katrina Sweat of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission on Thursday this week.
Religious freedom is actually, in a way, the freedom of our thought. The various different religious tradition, different philosophy, different tradition, but all carry same message of love and forgiveness, contentment, self-discipline. So these are, even non-believer, it is very relevant. Content and self-discipline and think more other rather than oneself.
Apart from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, Ambassador Sam Brownback, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Congressman Chris Smith and Frank Wolf, Senator James Lankford, Katrina Lantos Sweat and Samantha Powers of USAID also spoke at length at a 3-day summit. His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave a 2-day teaching on Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment at the request of the Ladakh Buddhist Association, Ladakh Gonpa Association and Tikse Rinpoche on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. When asked about how His Holiness accounts for his popularity with followers of religions other than Buddhism, His Holiness said that it is perhaps because he talks about the importance of cultivating a good heart. According to a report released by Human Rights Watch, 4 Tibetan monks were given extraordinarily harsh sentences following China's crackdown on Tengdro Monastery last year. Chogyal Wangpo, a 46-year-old monk and leader of Tengdro Monastery, had mistakenly left his cell phone at a cafe in Lhasa. The discovery of the cell phone revealed that Chogyal had sent a monetary relief for Tibetans living in Nepal for the loss suffered in 2015 earthquake. The Lhasa authorities considered the practice illegal and Chogyal was faced with beating and interrogation. Let's hear what Dukten Ki, the head of Human Rights Desk of CTA, has to say about this.
So after the discovery of Chogyal Wangpo's cell phone, the security forces in Lhasa traveled to Tingri, to his village and raided his village as well as Tengdro Monastery, which resulted in the arrest of 20 Tibetans. They were arrested because they had provided monetary funds for the earthquake that hit Nepal in 2015. So eventually, most of them were released. However, 4 of the monks, including Chogyal Wangpo, were given extremely harsh sentences, and they were actually tried after a year of their arrest. So we can only imagine what they have gone through, the ill treatment and torture while in custody before they were tried. So China has always treated Tibetans' expression or show of reverence to His Holiness the Dalai Lama as a crime. And even possessing a picture of His Holiness the Dalai Lama can land one in jail. However, nowadays we are seeing increasing crackdown on Tibetans for just contacting their family and friends who are in exile.
Chogyal Wangpo is now sentenced to 20 years, 43-year-old Lobsang Jimpa for 19 years, 64-year-old Nobu Dhundup for 17 years, and 36-year-old Nawang Yeshi for 5 years. Speakers mentioned the plight and lack of religious freedom under the Chinese Communist Party for Tibetan Buddhist, Uyghur Muslims, Christians and Falun Gong practitioners and called for protection of the religious freedom. Representative of Office of Tibet, Washington, Ngodup Tsering spoke at a side event titled Persecution of Religious Freedom in Tibet. The U.S. Senate confirmed Uzra Zeya, an American diplomat for the State Department's Undersecretary of State Bureau of Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights on Tuesday this week. In the past years, the Undersecretary of State Bureau of Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights tended to concurrently serve as a special coordinator for Tibetan issues. The Chinese government is repressing Tibetans, Christians and other ethnic minorities, stated Zeya during her nomination hearing in April. Zeya noted her experience working with Chinese descendants and noted China's current genocide against Uyghurs. She stated her desire to use congressional tools such as the Global Magnitsky Act and the Uyghur Human Rights Act during her tenure as Undersecretary. Representative Ngodup Tsering of the Office of Tibet, Washington, D.C. attended the Stop the 2022 Beijing Genocide Games rally in Washington, D.C. Representative Ngodup Tsering remarked, if China were to enjoy the privilege of being a member of the international community, it must also respect the international rules and norms pertaining to human rights, freedom and justice.
Decapitation of basic human rights in Tibet, Hong Kong and southern Mongolia. Look at their constant threat to Taiwan and India. More can be endangered if the CCP belligerence is not stopped. The 2022 Winter Olympics is a moment in history, and the international community must make China stop these egregious acts.
Representative Tashi Phuntsok visited Yuenten Ling, Tibetan Buddhist Center in Belgium and met journalist Ms. Giselle Nath on Friday last week. Representative Phuntsok and Ms. Nath discussed the 4 commitments of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and highlighted His Holiness's efforts to revive the Nalanda tradition, considering its contribution in modern times significantly relevant. They further spoke about the Tibetan administration in exile and the middle way approach. So much for this week. See you next time and have a good weekend.